It's great to be here. It's a privilege to be here. I love this festival because it's got an audience vote. It's very democratic. It doesn't have a jury. No, don't mean to demean juries, but I love the People's Choice Awards. I really do. I won't go on and on about it. You'll get to see it. Just remember, it's a work of fiction. It's not a history lesson, but it is about a time that occurred, and some instances that occur in the film did actually occur, but not in the way we showed them. These are my thespians. Guy Pearce plays the lead, of course. Followed very closely by Tioreore Ngatai-Melbourne. And followed very closely again by Jacqueline McKenzie. Anyone like to say anything?
Kia ora maita. I've been doing interviews all day, so my voice is gone. This is not actually how I sound. I sound cooler than this. Hoi anō. Tēnā rā tātou katoa. Ko Tioreore Ngatai-Melbourne tōku ingoa. I te tautaku māmā no Ngāti Porou. Rā I te tautaku pāpā no Ngai Tūhoi. E mihi ana kia koutou o tira ki tēnei whenua. Ki ngā tangata taketake o tēnei whenua. Mai tētahi tangata taketake from an Indigenous person to your fellows Indigenous person. Nei au e mihi ana kia koutou. O tira ki tēnei kaupapa, ki tēnei kiriata, ki ēnei tangata e tū mai nei ki aku taha, Lee, Jack, Guy. Nā koutou au I poi, I aki, taurawa mai ki tō tātou whānau o te convert I noho nei ki ngā tūru, ki aku mātua ki te whānau. Nō reira, this is an awesome experience. You probably didn't understand anything I said, but I hope that you've got it in the tone of my voice. Nō reira, e mihi ana, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Tioreore. Enjoy. We had such an amazing time making this movie, and it's such an honour to stand here alongside these beautiful people and be here celebrating something I just love so much.
The same from me. It's a great pleasure to be back here again at TIFF. I seem to come here every few years, and it's a wonderful film to be back here with, so please enjoy the film.
Thank you so much. We'll be back for a Q&A after the screening. Thank you so much for coming. Just carry on that. Thank you so much, Tioreore. And again, please, a round of applause for the director and the incredible cast of the Let's move a little bit to the center, please, just so we can get the right light and spotlight on you all. So I'll begin with the initial couple questions, but please formulate your concise questions around the film, and we'll come to you very shortly. Lee Tamahori. Congratulations and thank you so much again for sharing this film with us here tonight. Meant a lot to us to have this.
Good, thanks. It's getting a bit late, but I hope you all survived that. Anyway, I owe it all to these three and the others, the wonderful cast I had. Couldn't have made it without them, of course.
Leah, I'd like to ask you about the pressures of making a historical film, particularly in relation to authenticity, particularly again when it comes to Maori culture and communities.
It was a tricky one. In our own country, in New Zealand, all these, all the history, this particular period of history, first contact, so to speak, is very controversial to this day. And the legacy of colonialism is much the same as I guess is going on in Canada and the United States, and everywhere that colonizations occurred. I didn't want to make a political tract, and most of it's kind of secreted away in the story. But I wanted to show a movie that was where Māori dominated, and they were the predominant culture. And for the authenticity, we had to. It was important to get it right, or as right as we could, because not a lot is known about that period, and there's no photographs. We sort of had to make a lot of it up. We also had the oral history of Maori, which is preserved through millennia, much I'm sure as the First Nations and others preserves their stories through oratory. So these stories are not unknown to us. Now they're being written down and translated. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yes, no, incredibly insightful. And this started out as the source material was a book and a novel. I'm curious to hear again about that journey from your spark of creativity and when you thought this really could succeed as a film.
well, to be fair to the book, I've never read it. That's no offence to the writer, but it was not what it was based on. There was a screenplay adapted from the novel, and I worked from that. And Shane Danielson, the writer, who's here somewhere. Put your hand up, Shane. We decided to cut a whole cloth from it, because the original character of Monroe was a bit of a religious zealot, and I was never attracted by those characters. I was more interested in a humanist hiding in the robes of a cleric. And sorry, what was the question again?
I mean, you're answering it just in terms of the relationship to the source material.
Oh yeah. So we rapidly, massively overhauled the original screenplay, and wanted to bring an authenticity to Tioreore's character of Rangimai. And it was, we just keep beating the ploughshares until we got it right, until we were where we thought it was right. We didn't want it to have superhuman, superhero powers as a fighter. We wanted it to be authentic and as original as real combat as we could do it. But hers is a complex character, embracing aspects of European life, as well as learning from them very fast, picking up the language, being able to be bilingual. It's kind of the story of New Zealand in a way, a microcosm of what's happened, intermarriage, and sort of shaking. Anyway.
It's wonderful. That's a great segue to Tioreore.
Yeah.
Congratulations on this phenomenal performance, and also congratulations for being named as one of TIFF's Rising Stars for 2023 for this performance. Incredible praise from Lee Tamahori. Tell us about your character and really how you came to connect with her.
There goes the voice again. So I had the honour of playing Rangimai, and I see Rangimai as she's a representation of some of my ancestors who went through the similar things, converting into Te Ao Pākehā, the European ways, and learning the way of Te Reo Pākehā, karakia, and it's some things that my ancestors did too. And I think a lot of the grieving parts with Rangimai, I drew on. So my first language is Te Reo Māori, and that was the world that I grew up in. Thank you to my mum and dad for raising me in that world. And I watched my mum, my nannies and my aunties on our marae grieve so openly, similar to how Rangimai is, and that's where I drew from. I drew from my mum and them, and yeah, I'm grateful to have that upbringing, because if I didn't, I probably wouldn't be able to pull that off. And sometimes I used to think that they were acting when they would cry on the marae, but marae is a Māori meeting house in our culture back home. But yeah, she's a representation of heaps of our ancestors who went through similar things, And yeah, her purpose was revenge. Revenge that the mamae that Akatariwa put her tribe through, but was also peace. And she was also striving for the betterment of her people. Yeah.
Let's carry that line.
Yeah.
Jacqueline McKenzie as Charlotte. Congratulations. You've had such an incredibly varied career as well in film, TV, theater. How did Charlotte differ or add to your pantheon of characters?
Oh my goodness, it just so vastly, the entire experience from the start to the finish. You're right, I have been around the block. And,
But still a rising star. Yeah.
that's it, I have to
There too.
but it's a funny thing because the more blocks you've been around, the less likely you want to go around the block again because it takes so much for me. I get very invested in it, as we all do here on this stage. And but I was very fortunate because our producers, Troy and Andrew, who are here tonight, hands up, I've worked with a number of times in the past, and I trust them implicitly with their taste and the way they are able to free the people they work with. And then we have Lee Tamahori, and you know, Lee's film Once Were Warriors is, I mean, he gets so bored with me saying this probably, but it just impacted me in a way that no other film ever had. And I remember just looking at it thinking, I totally recognised myself in that film, I recognised my people in that film, and that wasn't a thing that even though it's a New Zealand film, what we're talking about is humanity. And even if it is ugly and violent and fractious, it's the truth, you know. And I think a lot of the films when I was growing up were very Australian. I'm Australian, and I didn't, as much as I might have enjoyed them, I didn't trust them. I didn't feel like I belonged in that world. And then we have beautiful Guy Pearce here, who was the heart and soul of The Proposition. And that was the second time I sat in a theatre on my own, both those films, and recognised the world I was in. I recognised Australia, I recognised where I came from. And because he tells the truth at that level. And so when I had the opportunity to work with Lee and Guy, I mean, you just can't. That's something that you're going to walk in and you're going to be affected because you know that's what you're going to be doing. You're called upon to tell the truth, however ugly and fabulous it is. And I knew always that that was what would be required, and I knew I would be safe in there. And if at any time you wouldn't be safe as if you wouldn't do that. And that's what was required. And every day I went to set and I knew what I was in from the minute I landed there, because Lee tells everyone what we are in. He shares his dream and his vision with us. Nothing's held back. We know what we're in. And when you have that level of generosity, you thrive in that. And I think with Lee has been a member of almost every department on a film set you probably have been to. And so there's this deep respect and regard for the workers around, whether they're swinging a boom or cooking the dinners for us or whatever. Every member of crew is integral to telling this story, and they were all on board. And as we just met Tukohe up here on the stage, every day he began the shoot by greeting everybody, the crew and extras, with this incredible, it's almost like a prayer when you're not understanding it, but you're listening to it. This community was born every day, and we were in the makeup trailer and we'd ask for them to turn the tannoy on so we could hear and be a part of it. So we were all a part of this incredible truth, I think, yeah. But also with Lee Tamahori, you know you're in for a good time. It's a story, because at the end of the day, the truth is for the audience. And that's what he's always been about, making a good story, and that's over to you.
Lovely, thanks. Yes, Mr. Guy Pearce, congratulations. I'd love to hear your journey to Thomas Monroe and how you became involved with this particular film.
Well, I met Lee. We met back in the 90s in LA, many years ago. off a couple of films. Obviously, Once Were Warriors that Jackie's mentioned that Lee was there promoting, and I had either just done LA Confidential or I was just doing it. And we met, got on very well, and sort of spoke through the years about working together, and never really found the opportunity to do so, or did, but I was unavailable, or timing just didn't work out. And then this came along, and the timing was right. And Lee and I spoke, and I read the script and was really moved by it, and so there was no question really in being involved. And it was just a series of phone conversations originally with Lee about who this character was and what the story was he was wanting to tell, and so it just sort of naturally evolved really in a beautiful kind of way. So you know, they're the best jobs really, where they just come about from a purely organic. I mean, Lee talks about sort of writing this with me in mind, which is a great honour, and so to be able to sort of fulfil that is really meaningful, and you know, here we are today, getting to sort of see it through. So it was a great experience from start to finish, really.
COVID was our best friend. Guy was busy and COVID came along, and then he was not busy, and one of the good stories.
I'll only do this if there's a pandemic.
Noted. Thank you for that. There's a lot to dive in here too. So let's start with some questions, please. Right here. Oh, sorry. Is there a microphone, or am I repeating the questions? No, I didn't hear that. So let's start with you over here. I'll repeat the questions after you say them.
Sure. I'm also pretty loud. You guys have mentioned that the sets were fun and that filming was fun, but it was a very serious topic. Like, how did you create a culture in the set that, you know, allowed it to be an enjoyable experience?
With the subject matter, how did you create a set, a production community that was uplifting?
Well, we realised, when I made Once Were Warriors, we realised that if Māori were going to be on one side of the camera acting, they'd be well advised to crew up so they could see that they were behind the camera as well. So we fought to include a lot of Māori crew members as well as the cast, and that's uplifted a lot of actors now. 20, 30 years later, there's a huge talent pool to draw on out there now. But so on this picture, as on all the pictures I've made in New Zealand, the trick is to get the crew, multicultural crew running, get as many Māori as you can and as many Pākehā as you can. So it comes a balance. So it's a truly bicultural shoot. So, and everyone got on famously. And you know, the emergence of the language, Te Reo Māori, is being learned by a lot more Pākehā now these days as well. It's not only resurgent in a younger generation of Māori, it's much like, I guess, French or Quebecan French permeates the language here. I don't know to what degree it permeates, but we're striving to do that.
Guy, how did that influence your performance? I mean, having this really strong Maori presence on the set.
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I just felt more immersed in this world. You know, I felt like an outsider, and that was probably good for the film. But incredibly welcomed by everybody, and you know, there was a real sense. Everybody has a great admiration for Lee, obviously, not just in this room, but certainly back in New Zealand, and it really felt that everybody was, you know, wanting to put their best foot forward, and I certainly always want to, but you know, even more so, finally getting to work with Lee. So I think culturally, it just meant that there was obviously a lot of access. Any questions that I had, there were plenty of people I could just sort of ask, you know, questions about. So it was a really kind of overwhelming experience, you know, to be so immersed in Māori culture and have it so present at every turn, really.
Here?
There's a very enthusiastic question over here. Helen.
Thank you for providing such a wonderful, affecting movie, all of you.
Thank
Silly
you.
question. I saw a reference in the credits to the Tamahori Orchestra. What is that?
He saw in the credits there was a reference to the Tamahori Orchestra. I was curious as to what that is.
I'm not sure what that is at all.
A question to be tabled. There was up here in the balcony.
This has to be one of the most exquisite films I've ever seen at TIFF. It's going to stay with me for a long time.
My biggest fan.
First question is for Guy. This seems to be like one of your more complicated roles. Can you tell us a bit more about how you prepared for it?
The question was for Guy. She mentioned this is perhaps one of your more complicated roles that she's seen. How did you prepare for Thomas Munro?
Well, as I said before, I mean, it really was about just discussions with Lee and just working on the script. I mean, if I have to do more than that, if I have to actually sort of delve in too much, then I almost feel like there's too much work to be done and too much to remember. If it comes organically and it comes out of just feeling inspired by the script and obviously inspired by the filmmaker, in this case Lee, then my imagination is fueled so sort of, you know, completely. And there was a long time, you know, Lee and I spoke quite some months before we shot the film. So really I had a long time to absorb this and yeah, I think just the process of being there. We had a little bit of rehearsal, you know, lots of sort of discussion when we got there, and it was just about making sure, you know, for me, I'm sure for any actor, it's just about understanding that you're in the right movie, you know, that you're not over there doing that when everyone else is doing that. That's always a shame when that happens. I've done that a couple of times before. So, you know, it's really important to make sure you're in the right place and that you feel that this journey is appropriate, and to find a character who, yes, he turns up as a lay preacher, but really he's searching within himself as much as anything else and just trying to survive. There was something really appealing about that, and it was easy enough for me to kind of, maybe I feel, you know, like I'm searching constantly myself, so it was easy enough for me to sort of tap into that sort of psychology and that idea. So it just felt like a natural process. It wasn't like I had to sort of do a whole lot of research per se. I mean, there were things that I was reading along the way just out of interest, but not to necessarily help me find the character.
Question here, in the hat.
Yeah, I was wondering if you might be able to share with us what the chief said before he was executed, or in lieu of that, perhaps the reasoning or thought process behind omitting some of the translations.
So the question was about the unsubtitled section at the end when the chief passed away. What did he say? Is that something you want to share?
No, I deliberately left it like that because I didn't think everything needed to be subtitled, so anything that's not subtitled is not sort of script specific or story requirement. It's not part of the narrative. But what they're just saying to each other, it was subtitled. I think most of it, but there's just, when he said Tioreore Nui, that's the name of the patu, the greenstone jade pounamu patu. So maybe someone was confused there, but if it wasn't subtitled, it wasn't necessary to the plot or to the advancement of the story.
Another question on this side. Do I see a hand up from over there? Tioreore, I would love to hear a bit more. When I first saw you in A Hunt for the Wilder People, have you seen that? She's phenomenal in that film. You brought such a force and presence to the screen in that particular role. You're growing up and you represent young Indigenous performers, filmmakers who are growing up in a very different world than we did, with this incredible content that we have out there. What do you look forward to in terms of sort of how Maori, Pacifica, other Indigenous filmmaking is unfolding?
I think I come from a small town of about 300 to 500 people in our community. And as I'm standing here right now, I not only represent myself, but I'm a face for all the small town kids, all the unknown talent who are still back home, trying to make it. And I hope that with what I'm doing and with opportunities that, with this amazing opportunity that Lee has given me, also the convert whānau, that they can see that it is possible to get to places like this. I'm still buzzing, I'm in Toronto. And yeah, I just hope that for the Indigenous storytellers back home, or everywhere, that we can show how bright we are, and we can show our talents and how creative we are, because we are, you know, like Taika has said before, we are the natural storytellers. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Beautifully, thank you so much. So a reminder, this film is playing again tomorrow afternoon and next week Saturday, so please spread the word. Please also vote at tiff.net/vote. Lee, any final words before we say goodnight?
No, it's just nice to be see it with an audience. First time I've seen it with a proper audience, so I really appreciate the feedback.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone, good night.
Good night. Thank you.